Her name was Maria Mandl. She was not a soldier. No one held a gun to her head. She chose to be the architect of industrial death. 500,000 people, a number that erases the names. How does one person do this? The system gave her absolute power. 80 years ago, this was her morning. Polished boots on a concrete floor, a perfectly pressed uniform. No chaos, just order. Her hand held a pen. It moved down endless lists of paper, the dry rustle of pages turning. That was the sound of her work. More than the population of modern Miami, an entire city erased by a bureaucrat's signature before lunch. She was not a monster from a storybook. She was a clerk, a diligent administrator. The final lists approved by her hand held 500,000 names. Her name would enter the history books, but her body had a more immediate destination. She decided the fate of 40,000 people. After death, she was denied even a grave. Her corpse became an object on a steel table, an anatomical specimen for medical students at Krakow University. No funeral, no family, no stone. In 1942, her power was absolute. She ruled over 40,000 lives, but her empire of death was temporary. The people she condemned outlived her ideology, and they outlived her. Anita Lasker-Wallfish, a cellist, survived Mandl's selections. She saw the terror, she endured, and she would live for decades, approaching the age of 100. Her testimony became history. Her life became the final verdict. Mandl's own end was anonymous. After the execution, the state delivered her body to the students of Krakow University. Her body was sent to a university dissection table, but first it had to die. That process began on January 24, 1948. Montelupik Prison, Krakow. At precisely 7:32 in the morning, 36-year-old Maria Mandl stood on the gallows. She was fifth in line, part of an unprecedented mass execution of the Auschwitz Command. Before her, Arthur Liebehenschel and 19 others. She spoke her final words in Polish. Long live Poland. Were these words genuine repentance? Or was it just a cheap political play before the inevitable drop? The question hangs over the moment. Then, the dull thud of the wooden trapdoor. A sharp crack in the freezing morning air. In total, 21 Nazi war criminals were executed that day. But for Maria Mandl, the hangman's rope was just a formality. Her true end came earlier, in the solitude of a death row cell. Inside Krakow's Montelupik prison, the steel facade began to crack. The untouchable commandant requested a Catholic priest. She confessed. A final, desperate manipulation? Or genuine remorse? History offers no answer. Then, a final plea. She begged for forgiveness from a former Auschwitz prisoner, a woman she once tormented. The victim, now facing her tormentor. The god of the camp, now brought low. The prisoner's reply was never recorded. On the final morning, all control was gone. Her hands trembled, clutching the cold steel bars of her cell. When the guards came for her, she fought them. A desperate physical struggle. This pathetic breakdown was a universe away from the icy calm she projected in the courtroom just months earlier. The trial that began in 1947, the Krakow Tribunal, November 24, 1947. Of the thousands of guards at Auschwitz, only 44 stood trial. Among them, just 5 women. Maria Mandl was one. Her defense was simple. She denied everything. A functionary, a cog in the machine. Just following orders. Then the testimonies began. Survivor after survivor took the stand. The sound of their voices filled the courtroom, a relentless chorus of memory. They named her. They described the beatings, the selections, the children torn from their mothers. How do you break the lie of the perfect overseer? The testimonies were a hammer, but one piece of evidence was the anvil. You show her her own handwriting. Just 2 years before sitting in this courtroom, she had tried to dissolve into the crowds, a nameless refugee in the ruins of the Reich. But on March 5, 1947, There was nowhere to hide. The prosecution presented the death lists, stacks of paper, thousands of names, and on page after page, her signature. Clear, unmistakable. The defense of following orders evaporated. This was not obedience. This was authorship. She confessed. A partial admission. Yes, she signed them. Most of them. The verdict on December 22, 1947 was inevitable. Death by hanging. But the legal record contained a special clause, an observation of unique cruelty. The tribunal officially cited her mistreatment of female prisoners she had already condemned to death as a specific, aggravating factor. American interrogators would later call her intelligent, sophisticated. Her father just saw a monster. When she arrived at his door in Munich, he refused to let her in. His own daughter turned away. This was spring 1945. The Third Reich was a corpse, and Mandl was a fugitive, fleeing the chaos of the Mühldorf camp. The SS uniform was gone, replaced by civilian clothes stained with the grime of her escape. The power vanished with the cloth. But her crimes followed her. Even in the final months, her work continued. As late as autumn 1944, she was still sending transports from Mühldorf, sending the sick back to the gas chambers of Auschwitz. There was no refuge, not from the Allies, not from her family. On August 10, 1945, the hunt was over. American forces captured Maria Mandl. The questioning began. Her father in Munich turned away from more than just rumors. By late 1944, Maria Mandl's signature stood on the death warrants for 500,000 people in Auschwitz-Birkenau. These were formal administrative documents, death lists, the dry scratch of her pen against long columns of tattooed numbers. A stack of paper that held the population of a large European city, 500,000 lives. Was she just a cog in the death machine? Witnesses testifying before the Polish Supreme National Tribunal proved otherwise. Survivors confirmed it under oath. Mandl was on the arrival ramp. She stood beside the SS doctors as trains unloaded their human cargo. With the same cold composure she showed at morning roll call, she pointed, left or right. The court's verdict called her cruelty exceptional, even by the standards of the camp. She wasn't just signing papers. She was enjoying the power. They had no choice. But Mandl's power was not just the final word on the selection ramps. In the spring of 1943, it found a new, more grotesque expression, through music. In April, she founded the Women's Orchestra of Auschwitz, a personal project, a tool for ambition. She needed to impress the SS hierarchy, to project an image of culture onto a factory of death. In August 1943, she found her conductor, Alma Rose, a formidable Austrian violinist and the niece of composer Gustav Mahler, the pinnacle of European culture, now a prisoner playing for her life. The orchestra performed for the camp's elite. Dr. Joseph Mengele was reportedly moved to tears. Reichsfuhrer Heinrich Himmler praised their skill. On Sunday afternoons, SS officers listened to Schubert and Brahms. Meters away, the crematoria worked without pause. The power was absolute. A French singer, Fania Fenelon, was summoned in the night to sing privately for Mandl. Under Alma Rose, the orchestra saved lives not for mercy, but for their musical utility. It grew to 47 women. October 1942. Maria Mandl arrived at Auschwitz-Birkenau. The largest stage in the entire camp system was now hers. 40,000 female prisoners, the population of a medium-sized European town, given to one woman. Her name was now law. What does absolute power over 40,000 lives look like? She reported to Commandant Rudolf Haas, but in her domain, she was the final authority. Survivor Anita Lasker-Wallfish remembered. Mandl stood at the camp gate, silent, watching the prisoners. One rule: do not meet her gaze. A single glance was a death sentence, not punishment, annihilation. She devised other tests: a wooden cane, the dry sound of it knocking on the frozen Birkenau ground. Mandl holds it steady, 50 centimeters high. Exhausted women returning from work must jump over it. A stumble, a fall, a moment of weakness. It seemed like a test of fitness, a cruel but standard check. It was a filter for the gas chambers. Then, in April 1943, Maria Mandl founded the Women's Orchestra of Auschwitz. But before Auschwitz, there was a proving ground. A place where Maria Mandl did not just learn the mechanics of terror, she mastered them. In May 1939, she arrived at Ravensbrück, the only major concentration camp the Reich built exclusively for women. Here, Mandl studied the system, not just to follow orders, but to innovate. 132,000 women passed through its gates. 92,000 of them never walked out. They died from starvation, disease, and execution. And in this factory of death, Mandl's career thrived. By April 1942, she was promoted, senior supervisor. And here, she made the critical pivot. She began selecting women for medical experiments, sending them to blocks that reeked of carbolic acid and sharp chemicals. This was not always a direct command. Increasingly, it was her own initiative, a conscious choice. The obedient follower was gone. In her place, a volunteer for atrocity. Mandl left Ravensbrück, a fully formed instrument of extermination. But this architect of suffering was not born a monster. She was made, forged in a quiet Austrian province, Münzkirchen, Austria, January 10, 1912. The world of her childhood smelled of rough leather and shoe polish from her father's workshop. A peaceful town, a conservative, deeply religious Catholic family. Nothing suggested the horror to come. What makes the daughter of a Catholic shoemaker voluntarily put on a uniform with SS runes? The year is 1938. Austria is consumed by the Reich in the Anschluss. Maria Mandl is 26 years old, adrift, looking for a purpose. She sees a recruitment notice for the SS auxiliary. Her eyes scan past the ideology. They lock onto the promises. A sharp uniform, a defined status, a steady salary. For a young woman from the working class, the pay of a guard dwarfed any other option. It was a ticket out. A promotion in a world with no promotions for her. The choice was brutally simple. She enlisted. Her first assignment was the Lichtenberg concentration camp, the beginning. The order for her first transfer arrived in May 1939.